Hello there, everyone. Patricia Hayes here, and I'm so excited to be here with you today for today's Coffee Time Career Chat, where we are interviewing some of my favorite people. And I am excited to have my guest here, Bessie Graham, from way down under. She's literally joining me from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm super excited about it. So, the fact that we were able to manage and find a time that works for both of us and nobody's like sound asleep or just
Yeah.
waking up is magical in and of itself. Bessie is a long term entrepreneur with many kudos and accolades behind her name, but her real focus and the work that she does is focused on helping people to do better with what they have and to make the impact on the world that really means something to them in an aligned fashion. Now, I'm sure she will share way more about what it is she's doing because she's got some great things that she's pivoting on and doing some work on. So, Bessie, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you. And we do get lots of points for the time zone,
We
making it all
do, we
happen.
do, we do. I'm trying not to even think about what day it is for you, so we're not going to mention days of
Exactly.
the
It'll
week
get
because it will be
confusing.
so confusing. So tell me what's going on with you these days. What are you working on? I'm super excited to hear about a few more things.
Yeah. Well, so as you know, the last sort of 20 years for me have really been focused on what is that central role that business plays in society for those of us who are running businesses, leading organizations. How does business contribute in positive ways to the world? Because I think it has an incredibly important role in that. It's not just about making profit for profit's sake. It's about how do we actually add value to our customers? How do we make the world a better place on the back end of our organization existing in the world? But what I've seen over that 20 plus years is just I keep getting drawn back to my roots, which in terms of university and my studies were all focused really on leadership and that central role of actually us as leaders, how we inspire and create a vision and bring people along on that journey.
Yes.
And what I've seen in this work around trying to bring back together the ideas of doing good and making money in the world, we can create incredible business models, wonderful organizations in terms of what we think they are capable of. We can have visions of our contributions or interventions we're going to make to actually address social or environmental problems. And that's where I've been spending a lot of my time on designing those solutions. And yet, time and again, unless the leaders of those organizations, the business owners, have done their own personal work as a leader, it doesn't matter how good your design is or the business model is, you will not have the impact you sought in the world.
Yes.
And so that really, for me, is the answer to your question that I, in this last 2 years, have been grappling with. How do I have the most impact? Where do I put my time, talent, and treasure to work so that I can be part of really contributing in the world? And for me, that shift has come to say, if I can find those passionate people who have a vision for wanting to contribute to the world in those bigger ways, if I can help them actually be equipped to do that effectively in ways that they can do over many, many years, because change takes time,
Yes.
then if we can do that in an aligned way and they can be clear on their values and that vision, then that's how I will best contribute to change in the world. So that's really my focus.
I love that. I love that. And let's talk a little bit because when you mention leadership development, like it
Mm,
becomes this kind of,
of course.
staid word and people,
Yes.
it like kind of makes you want to not use it. I mean, because I do work in leadership
Mm,
development, but we're always trying to find other
other
words
words.
to
Yeah.
describe it because, it seems overused.
Becomes tired. Yes.
It sounds tired.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if
Mm,
you are really seeking to be a leader in the organization, in your
mm.
space, whatever it
Yeah.
is, then you do have to take the efforts that it's going to take to make yourself better so that you can serve your people well. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
you're
don't know
right.
how we get past that.
It's tricky because you and I have also in the past had conversations quite passionately about the important aspect of something like values. That's another word, values, leadership. These words get thrown around to the point where they mean nothing. And yet, we do have to figure out how to have those conversations because they are foundational and they are central. We can be very busy, and people like you and I and those watching, we are ambitious and driven, and we want to not just think, we want to act. So we want to be out there acting without actually grappling with important topics like leadership and like values. We will be frantic and busy, lots of action, but we won't necessarily be impactful or having a meaningful life that when we look back, we can say, I am proud of that legacy I have created.
Oh my gosh, I got the chills. You were speaking my language. Like, I love this. Because it's so true. And when I'm talking to people, when I'm working with folks one on one, just like I'm sure you do,
Yeah.
and it's kind of that, it's a little bit morbid piece, but I'm like, what do you want your legacy to be? Right?
Yeah,
If
such a
someone
good
is
question.
putting together your
Yes,
eulogy,
the
what do you
eulogy.
really want them to talk about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's a totally different spin. When you put that out there for people,
Exactly.
it's like the light bulbs go off. They're like, well, that's totally different than all the things I'm doing. Right.
Yes. Yes.
So
Well,
I
because so
love
often too, it's that aspect of there's either hasn't been the thought given to are the activities I'm doing or the things I'm spending my time on, are they trending in that direction of where I want to go? So sometimes we just haven't thought about it. But other times we would say on paper, we've thought about it, but we've actually just written down what everyone else thinks, like what does success look like to everyone else, or get this role or this paycheck or this, like, so we tick the boxes, but they're not necessarily from a place of deeply knowing and understanding ourselves and what will feel satisfying for us, not for someone else.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I am a huge fan of encouraging people to take that reflection time.
Yeah.
And,
So
for a
important.
lot of people, that's considered woo, right? I was like, oh, but it's like
Yeah.
that is incredibly valuable time because it requires you to slow down
Yes.
and actually give some thought to
Yeah.
what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable in that space.
Yeah.
How do you
We
help when you're working with people? How do you help them to get to that?
Well, probably similar to you. I think so often the way that it starts to resonate for people is they need to hear stories and examples of like, how does that play out? So recently in the weekly show that I'm doing online, my husband and I had a conversation. I brought him on and we talked about our core values as a family. And one of the comments that he made, which has been very true for us over the 19 years we've been together, is that because we have these conversations, so as you said, someone might think that's a waste of time, that's a bit woo-woo, but because we have those conversations deeply and regularly, and we know where we are headed and we know what we value and what's important to us, actually the opposite ends up happening. We are far more decisive than other people I know. We can make massive decisions very quickly and not reactive decisions. So you might say, oh yeah, I make decisions really quickly. Yeah, but do you then not sleep for the next 6 months because you're stressed about that was actually a really silly decision, unwise, and not built on a thoughtful process? So I would say that my experience and the experience of those I've worked with over many years is that taking that time actually is the best way to ensure that you will be the most effective, efficient, incredibly decisive person, but that it will be in the direction of where you want to go. How can you be trending in that direction if you don't even know what the destination is?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a journey, but ultimately there are some things that you want to accomplish or that you want to achieve, or whatever the thing is,
Yes.
the place,
That's different for everyone, which is why you have to do it personally. Yes. I can't take what you could go away and think for days and come up with a beautiful plan for your life. I can't just pick that up and embed it in my own life. Yeah. It is a personal exploration.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree. When you're working with folks on that, how do
Yeah,
you do that? Because I know that when I'm working one on ones with some people,
yeah,
I have this whole strategic action plan and I have to explain to them, I'm like, this is a framework
yes,
that we're going to work through so that it becomes yours. It's personalized to you. I can't fill this out for you, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
just the framework. So, what does that look like for you
yeah.
when you're helping people to do that same thing?
Yeah. So as you said, I mean, in the work that I'm doing, because that end focus is around, let's ensure you have designed and are clear on what a meaningful life looks like for you. That is personal. But the steps, if you like, in that methodology or what we work through is very much embedded in this idea of the slowing down to speed up, that this work, you need to pause, you need to be reflective. And really, for us, it goes through a number of key areas. Within what we call the essential foundations, we talk about the fact that you need to be grounded in values. So it's the work to actually pull apart not just what you say your values are, but deeply sort of questioning and working through how that plays out in how you behave and getting those examples. So grounded in values is part of the foundational piece. Then the practice around 20 minutes of stillness. So that can look different for different people. I talk about stillness rather than meditation or different bits because not everyone is drawn to or wants to meditate. I'm not a fan of meditating, but I definitely have my rituals of my cups of tea in the morning and needing that quiet time before others wake up, so whatever that looks like for you, but it's the ability to quiet out the noise of everyone else and be really sitting with and hearing your own voice and what you need and want,
Yeah.
which is really important in that second kind of foundational piece. Then it's these aspects then of the third piece we talk about as decision cascading. And that is about being able to be clear on where is the point or the decision I've made that I will not go beyond that. So it's not up for grabs. All other decisions come within the constraints of that primary decision. So the clarity of that and then making our decisions from that point is the third sort of step from there. And then automating the everyday. So it goes down to how do you not waste your headspace on things that you could have made a decision once. Once you're aligned and you're clear, make some of those decisions. So I think there's obviously a whole bunch of other aspects that we walk through, but that's one of those frameworks, as you mentioned, that is helpful from those foundational pieces that are practices for us as leaders and just part of that ritual and routine that ensure we can have the ability to come back and hear our own voice in amongst all the noise.
Yes, yes, yeah. And and recognizing what is that, the phrase I like to use is I don't like to give people a blank sheet of paper, right? Because you don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's literally let's draw the box. Let's help you draw the box.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
they really do need those boundaries to help them move along. And then once you get comfortable in that,
Yeah.
then you can work through expanding and doing some things
Exactly.
differently.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. Speaking of leadership and things like that, we met in a women's networking group.
We
And
did.
it's the most fantastic thing because I've had the great opportunity of meeting women all around the world. And tell me, what does that mean for you, especially with the work that you're doing about connecting with people and how you can connect with them more deeply, especially in this space where we're doing so much remotely around the world, all of that good stuff.
We used one of my favorite words there around the connecting, because I certainly, for me, I'm more drawn to the idea of relationships or connecting than I am to the word networking. So it's that piece of, I think, we're talking about the same thing, but I would go with your language there because I think that is the most important aspect of what we're all trying to do when we're seeking these interactions with people. As you said, I mean, it's been such a shift in these last few years around COVID for someone like me, my primary way of connecting and building relationships has always been face-to-face.
Yes.
So it's been, I love and am effective in the room with someone, but it is a whole nother ball game that I'm still attempting to learn to really build those connections in that same deep way over Zoom or with, people. I've always done it with people in multiple different countries. I've been doing that for decades, but I've traveled. So I haven't had the small circles of only ever, interacting with people that live near me. I've always had broad networks, but I've been able to do them face to face. So it is a new challenge, and different.
And because that's even more, that's even more powerful for you because, you're in Australia. And so the fact that you were used to being able to get on a plane and go to whatever country
always,
where you're working with people and doing that. We're whining here in the States about not being able to go to the next city or the next state, but you're talking about thousands and thousands of miles.
Exactly.
And it's impacting you. So what does that look like as far as adjusting to that challenge when it looks so much different for you?
Yeah. So the honest answer is I don't have a beautiful, laid out, already humming plan because it is evolving. Right. I have been very conscious, though, of thinking through the types of work or interactions I will do remotely, because there are some aspects, say, for example, in a lot of the work I was doing before COVID, much of the breakthroughs or those aha moments I was getting people, you were having to have pretty difficult conversations and really pushing people into uncomfortable spaces. Mm-hmm. And I take seriously that responsibility of the state that you leave someone in, and that I want them to always be in a better place on the back end of an interaction. Yes. And as I've been learning to use something like Zoom, what I have found is interactions are taking much longer to get to that place where there's enough trust and rapport to push someone into those difficult areas. Yeah. And also you have to be careful because you may misread body language over Zoom and think you can go somewhere, but actually the person was clenching their hands and very uncomfortable and you couldn't see that. Whereas in a room, I pick up on body language. So for me, it's sometimes deciding not to do a piece of work and passing it to someone else because I don't think it would be responsible for me to do that. Wow. And in other instances, it is being honest with someone about the fact that I can run rings around anyone if I'm in the room, but I'm figuring out how to do this remotely. So bear with me. It may be a bit clumsy or messy in that interaction because it's a totally different skill.
That's a really, really important fact that you just brought up, especially about the body language thing, because there's so much we do. When I was lobbying, my background,
yes,
I was a lobbyist. I would deliberately stay at the back of the room. I would not sit down. I would stand at the back of the room so that I could see everybody and I could watch those interactions and I could watch those little looks that people would give each other. And we don't get to have that.
No, and even more so in government work. So I do a lot of advisory work for federal government here in Australia in particular. And I, again, am used to being in the room. So usually I would go to Canberra, which is like our version of Washington, DC, and I would be in the room. And I'm like you, I am always watching everyone who's sitting around. Yep. I might be at the big table, but I'm going, I think you have a question. Like I can read there's someone who's unsure and other people are just ignoring them. But I'm going, oh no, there's something going on there. We need to understand that. When we're now doing everything remotely, the broader employees within those departments all have their cameras turned off. So I can't see them. So not only is it difficult, but there's layers which actually take away the effectiveness. So I'm a big fan of, and if we go to some of the aspects of how does connection and relationship and networking shape our careers, I'm a huge fan of that. And it has every opportunity I've had, every job I've had is based on a relationship or a connection where there was trust and rapport built up over time. Mm-hmm. I am not sure how that is going to look in a world where so much of that goes remote, because the honest answer is that's not my skill set. My skill set has been in the room.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's going to be really interesting. I know when things really started 2 years ago, I can't believe we can say that. I was on a loss because, I do a lot of public speaking. I'm like you, I do a lot of things of being in the room and being in the space with people.
Yeah.
And I was like hyperventilating there for a second. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And
Yeah.
literally, I just came back to the thing that circling back around to where we started was I have a unique set of skills. We
Exactly.
are in a very, different world with lots of things going on and a lot of unknowns. How can I contribute? And at first,
Yes.
I thought it was going to be, from a legal perspective or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I'm a lawyer by training, but I realized I'm like, no, people
Yeah.
don't know how to connect with each other in real
Yeah.
time, in real life. They're really going to be like, how do we do this in this new space?
Yeah.
And so I said, I don't know if this is something that's going to be open, and
Mm.
well received, but I did. And so that's how I created that. What was I calling it? Maintaining professional relationships in a crisis.
Yeah.
And I just started putting it out there. And
Mm-hmm.
here we are, two years later, and I am still getting requests for that presentation.
And I wonder, I mean, one of the pieces that I think is a logical extension of attempting to solve that very challenge is that if we think about the way relationships have played a role in our own careers. So for me, for example, I remember over a decade ago, I read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first moment where I realized, oh, while my parents didn't give me anything financially in terms of I came from a family that didn't have wealth or money, and I've had a job since I was 10, and I've worked incredibly hard for everything that I have in my life now. When I read that book, I suddenly realized, my parents gave me the most incredible network because their friends are extraordinary. And when I then tracked, I was like, I haven't actually had to go through a formal interview process because I've always known someone who's known someone who's known someone who's said, oh, we need you. I haven't had to. I moved to Melbourne from Sydney 19 years ago and didn't know anyone. And I went to key friends of my parents who were established and had networks and said, who should I talk to in Melbourne? And they connected me. At every point, whether it was related to people who shaped how I thought as a child, who opened up doors and their own networks to me in my career. It's how I met my husband, like all of these pieces that have absolutely been critical steps in my life and career all come back to the relationships of my parents. So they didn't give me wealth and financial kind of abundance. They gave me incredible networks and their own friendships. And so I wonder, when I think about that in the context of what we're talking about, even if we then are saying, oh, now I can't be in the room in New York in the way I could have got on a plane 2 years ago and been there. If we think through our broader network, who do I know who can be the point who says, I trust Bessi, I've worked with her, she's extraordinary, you should absolutely work with her. Now, that relational dynamic, we've built up over decades, those networks face to face. And I think we all know that if someone you trust recommends someone, you will also trust that person. And that, I think, is the unlock to this inability to be in the room now, is to actually tap into the relationships we have already cultivated over many decades.
I love it. I love it. You are singing my song. This is the thing that I'm always telling people because they underutilize and undervalue their relationships horribly. And
Yeah.
where people think I have to, quote, start from scratch when they're doing
Mm.
something, like, you don't have to start from scratch. We do need to sit down, though, and let's talk about who you know. Let's talk about the things you've done, your interest. And when you start putting that picture together, people have very rich relationships, very rich networks that they've never tapped into. And the
Exactly.
value, like you say, people assume the value of something that's got a dollar attached to it. Sometimes the value of the relationships you have can make up for that in ways you can't even begin to assess. So I love that. I love it. Oh my gosh, this has been fantastic. Fantastic. We could keep going. All right. So we've already talked about the fact that like we could have this chat for a while. We've done this before, you guys.
Hours and underwater.
Bessie are like, we're gonna have to start like timing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
A good thing we don't have to worry about the international fees on a phone call.
Very true. Yeah.
That's one benefit. That's one benefit. So, but as we wrap up here, I would love to get what you've shared so much. There's just been so much, but I would love to get what your greatest, I don't know, tip, value regarding connections and
Mm.
relationships that you would want people to know. And then tell us a little bit more about where we can find you, where we can connect, and so that we can kind of keep that conversation going if someone is wanting to follow up with you.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of that initial question of the strategies or the pieces that I cultivate to actually build up those connections, for me, it starts with, like much of the work I do, it starts with an understanding of myself. So, I'm a very deeply introverted person, not at all shy, but I'm introverted. And so I know that if I go into, back in the olden days, a conference or a uh, big group of people where there are little cliques and it's hard to kind of break into a conversation, and how do you, I don't like surface level kind of let's just talk about, have small talk and
Yes.
not have a deep conversation. So I know myself well enough that the strategies that I have then implemented is, I've said, okay, I need to put myself in situations where, if I am in a big room, I actually love chairing the conference instead of sitting in the conference at a table and awkwardly having to talk to people I don't know. So what I actually intentionally design the interaction so that I'm at my best rather than being awkward and uncomfortable. So that is a critical strategy for me of working that out. When it comes to pieces where there is not the opportunity to, say, chair the event rather than be a participant, it's about seeking out people who are wanting the same kind of conversation as me. If I can have a deep conversation, I could talk to you for hours. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm not antisocial. I just don't do the small talk well. So I think the strategy answer for me is about figuring out your own genius and brilliance and when you're at your best, and ensuring that you create the opportunity to engage in that way when you are connecting with people. So that would be my response to that. Yeah, in terms of, for anyone who wants to follow up or connect, because I would love to have a longer conversation, the best place at the moment, I have a Facebook group called Both and with Bessi Graham, and we will be launching our podcast in mid-March. So keep an eye out for that. But really, I think just starting to reach out on social media and be part of the conversation, because what I want to create is that space where we as leaders seeking more, going, there is more to life and success than is currently in the mix. I don't want people to feel alone in that. So if nothing else, come and join the community on Facebook and connect. And that's where we'll be having weekly videos and different conversations, as well as the podcast starting weekly in mid-March.
I'm so excited. I can hardly wait for it. I'm super excited. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bessi. This has been fantastic. And of course, you're going to have to like reconnect again and
Indeed.
check in later. And thank you all for joining us today. I will be sure to drop all of Bessi's contact info in the comments and in the notes, and so that you can follow up as well. Make sure that if you have a question, drop them in the comments. We'll check back in, or just DM me and I will help make things happen. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for Coffee Time Career Chat. And we will check in with you all later. Bye bye.